Thank you, Mr. President, for giving me this exciting opportunity to speak here at the Oxford Union on what I think is such an important topic. The covers of our newspapers are littered with images of asylum seekers crossing the channel on these small boats. This terrifying and dangerous journey is one that we've become all too familiar with as we hear about accident after accident. The British government is determined to blame gangs, to blame the French government, and to blame the asylum seekers themselves, in order to relieve themselves of any responsibility for the crisis that they have engineered. The hysteria created in the UK villainises the most vulnerable in society and distracts from other failings in government policy. In my speech, I will argue that the government has engineered this problem due to 3 areas of failure: the lack of safe and legal methods to asylum, the lack of understanding of the illegal gang business model, and the refusal to let asylum seekers work. But first, the duty falls upon me to introduce your opposition. Speaking first is Charles Chadwick, a second-year classicist from St Anne's. I'm honoured to be addressing the Union on the same night as a man with such a rich student electoral history. Not only did Charlie lose his ALCA leadership election, but he failed to be elected Secchi, beaten by our very own treasurer. Given his record in the poll, I feel confident about the results of tonight. And second speaking is Priya Mahan, a first-year history student at Lady Margaret Hall. Now, I have to admit that I've not prepared a roast for Priya, as I wasn't expecting her to make it into the building tonight. The first time I met Priya was at a brunch where she forgot to make a booking, and therefore we got kicked out of the restaurant. The second time I met Priya was at a Slate social, where she forgot to bring her ID, and again she didn't make it in the building. So I am as delighted as I am surprised that she is sat here in the chamber right now. Although I must admit, I am more surprised that she's not yet asked for a photo for her 27th Instagram story of the day. And finally, you will hear from Tim Lawton, MP for East Worthing and Shoreham. He's held many esteemed positions: Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Children and Families, and most notably, Labour Party member. Mr. Lawton was involved in the 2015 scandal where Conservative MPs joined the Labour Party before the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. I do hope, for the sake of the opposition, that Mr. Lawton does not also join the side of the proposition in this debate. In all seriousness, it is an honour to share the chamber with such an experienced politician, and I am looking forward to hear him speak. Mr. President, these are your guests, and they are most welcome. A year and a half ago, 18-year-old me, full of the joys of Year 13 summer, started volunteering for Manchester Refugee Support Network. I was shocked by the insecurity of their residents, worried about the ability of the government to send them home, and appalled by the challenge it was to get basic necessities: housing, education, healthcare. This was 18 months ago. Since then, the government has passed the Nationality and Borders Bill, agreed the UK-Rwanda partnership, and proposed the Illegal Migration Bill. These bills constitute an outright attack on asylum seekers. The policies are not only morally abhorrent, but they're economically illiterate. It is government policy that is to blame for the crisis in which we find ourselves. It is a crisis of hysteria, a crisis of understanding, and a crisis of empathy. In their most basic form, these 3 bills prevent any asylum seeker who has entered the UK illegally from receiving asylum in the UK. They will be immediately removed, and if refugee status is granted, they will remain in this safe third country. The UK practically claims no responsibility for any asylum seeker who enters illegally. Now, to make a quick point on illegal entry, Article 31 of the Refugee Convention that the UK signed states, and I quote, "The contracting states shall not impose penalties on account of their illegal entry." However, I do not intend to base my argument on the Refugee Convention. I'm happy to accept that illegality is bad. I don't speed, I don't litter, I've never stolen a 5p bag from Tesco, so as a law-abiding citizen, I thought I should mention the asylum seekers who have arrived legally. Since 2015, the government has issued over 150,000 visas to people from Hong Kong. They've helped 230,000 Ukrainians fleeing the war and provided 25,000 Afghans safety in the UK escaping the Taliban. However, beyond this set of countries that I would optimistically call the most in need and pessimistically call the most electorally beneficial, I want to focus on all the schemes that allow asylum seekers to enter the UK through safe and legal methods. So there's a family reunion scheme and the mandate scheme, but they both need a refugee to have family already in the UK. There is the community sponsorship scheme, but again, this requires that neighbours, charities, or faith groups take responsibility for their refugees. The only way for asylum seekers who have no connection to the UK to enter safely and legally is through the Global Resettlement Scheme. From 2017 to 2021, this scheme has resettled just under 21,000 asylum seekers. So yes, the government is correct. Asylum seekers can arrive by safe and legal methods. If they wait around for the UNHCR to find them, and when they do, they get picked as one of the 1% of refugees that are most in need. So, quite frankly, the only viable option is crossing the Channel. But rather than addressing their involvement in the issue, the government is presenting itself as a saviour, protecting these vulnerable asylum seekers from the tyranny of illegal gangs. And the government is right to try and stop people smuggling. No one should have to pay £4,000 for a seat on a flimsy dinghy to cross this treacherous journey. And it's abhorrent that gangs are profiting from this, making over £180 million in 2022. However, unlike the policies of government in response to this, my views are informed by economics. I'm a PPE student here at Oxford, as are probably too many people in this room and definitely too many people in government, including Lincoln College's very own Rishi Sunak. So far I've learned one key lesson that the government seems to have forgotten. Demand means supply. There is demand from asylum seekers to come to the UK to seek refuge, and if there is no easier way to travel here, then there will be demand from these asylum seekers to travel by small boats, and people smugglers will be more than willing to supply. In fact, the harder it is to get to the UK through safe and legal methods, the more asylum seekers will be left with no choice but to rely on these people smugglers. But don't take my word for it, the government puts it much better. The government states that since the Nationality and Borders Bill was introduced, the number of people arriving by small boats has actually increased. Strict asylum policy does not stop small boat crossings. The only people the government is helping are the people smugglers and the writers of the Daily Mail. These newspapers are constantly reminding us how much money is spent on this asylum system, and it's an immense £3 billion a year. Now, just for comparison, The Telegraph recently reported that the government wasted £14 billion in the past 15 months. Now, I, personally, would rather the government focused on this spending, but, apples and oranges. In all fairness, £3 billion is a lot of money, but there are many alternative policies that could reduce the net costs without removing the internationally recognised rights of individuals. In the UK, asylum seekers are banned from working. Asylum seekers are banned from being active participants in the economy. It has been suggested time and time again that the government could allow asylum seekers to work in order for them to support themselves and reduce the cost on the UK. And time again, the government has provided the same excuse, that it would create a pull factor. But there is no evidence of this. If there was a pull factor, then why do asylum seekers still travel through France and Spain and Germany, where there are much better rights to work? In France and Spain, asylum seekers are able to work if they have not received a response within 6 months. And in Germany, this is 3 months. In the UK, after 12 months in special circumstances, you might be allowed to apply for a job from the following list, including programmer and software development professional, chemical scientist, but only jobs in the nuclear industry, dancer and choreographer, but again, only skilled classical ballet dancers or skilled contemporary dancers who meet the international standard. If the government does not allow asylum seekers to work, it is hardly a surprise that they are a cost to the economy. Since the Nationality and Borders Bill, 45,000 people a year have crossed by small boat, 90% of which claim asylum, and 75% of initial claims are granted asylum. Yes, some people are economic migrants who come to the UK in search of economic opportunities. But the narrative that is presented, that the UK is swarmed by economic migrants posing as asylum seekers, is simply false. Creating and fueling this fabricated story is a conscious decision on the part of the government. The government is failing in many areas. Inflation remains high. GDP growth is expected to be the lowest of all G7 countries this year. And public sector borrowing is at a near record high. Electorally, the government desperately needs a win. By targeting those less able to speak for themselves, the government has created a common enemy, a scapegoat, a golden ticket to the next election. If Rishi can pass a law that denies asylum seekers access to the UK, he can tick off one of his 5 priorities for 2023 and claim that his premiership has been a success. This is a government-caused crisis. The government villainises asylum seekers for coming to the UK illegally while leaving them no other option. The government is making the business model of illegal gangs more profitable by increasing demand. And the government is causing asylum seekers to be a burden on the economy by refusing to let them work. The crisis around refugees is an electoral chess piece in the game of Westminster. It is a magician's wand to redirect the public from the failings of government, and that is why I propose side proposition. Thank you.